Hello, my friends. This is Uncle Mike, and I have our weekly conversation. First off, I got to apologize. I haven't done one of these for a couple weeks. I've been putting out a whole bunch of other stuff and been very active in other parts of Susquehanna Alchemy, but I have not been doing these weekly one-on-one calls. That's what this feels like. Like I always feel like I'm just talking to one person. So you're probably one person who's watching this. So just think I'm talking to you. So I miss this. I miss this. Like, there's one thing to do like conversations with other people and share those videos, and I'm certain that they probably provide some value in terms of watching, but there's something different when I feel like I'm speaking directly to you. And I feel that it being a little bit different. I don't know. Maybe you do as well. It feels a little bit more personal. Nonetheless, I'm back. It's been a couple weeks. I'm happy to be back here. It's going to be a good, interesting sort of conversation. I'm going to be talking about matrix mind magic in the first half, and then the second half for the subscribe star folks. We're going to get into some stories, and I've got such a friggin' fantastic story. If you recall the Freemasonic poem I received in December, which like opened up the whole glass bead game. Well, the person behind that has sent another package, and this is mind-blowing stuff. So you don't get to hear that unless you watch the second hour. So I want to begin. Last time I made one of these conversations, I stressed my desire and need to have some additional support. I asked for support on Subscribestar, and I had asked for support in Biomancy services. And you guys rose to the challenge. Thank you very much. I got about 25 new subscribers on Subscribestar, and a whole bunch of you guys ordered these Biomancy sessions, and I'm immensely grateful. Thank you very much. But I'm not going to stop asking. That currency needs to move like the current, as long as we're in the system, we're all part of it. And though it is a sick, manipulated system as it relates to what they've done with money, we know it's based upon, current magic, which basically means it should always be in movement, velocity of money. So that's what we want to align to. So if you got to move the current, you move a little bit of that current my way. So I'd love to see 25 more of you. There are a bunch of you who probably heard me mention that last time, and you said, well, maybe. And then, they got taken off that line of thought, and you didn't sign up. And so like now's your time to sign up, and particularly because there's some really good stories which you're going to want to hear in the second half. Biomancy sessions, I'm not doing them anymore. That doesn't mean I'm not offering sessions, but the beginning of March of last year, I stopped offering starboard ceremonies. And I started offering a biomancy session, and that was a little bit different. And I did that for a year, and a year has passed, and now I'm doing something different called Skymancy. We are all unfolding. We are all unfolding right now. Everything's changing. I'm changing, you're changing, all that sort of stuff. And part of the way which I express that is, the way I meet people is changing to what is true in the time for me. And so it's like the time of biomancy is done, and the Skymancy is taking its place. Go to the website, read about it. These are fantastic services right now, particularly as, if you're watching this, you're probably intrigued by the idea of like, how do I, on greater and greater levels, detached from matrix mind magic, matrix consciousness. And so these services are very much in alignment with that, the Skymancy. And what we do is, in the most basic level, is we take our foundational awareness away from the false reality and we integrate it with something real. But we don't integrate it through another matrix. We integrate it through understanding it from a more tangible, objective level. But then also knowing that there is something deeper happening that is more than it's deeper than the rational mind. That's the greater reality stuff. So go to the website Skymancy, look at those services. But I got something also exciting to share, and that is in the past couple weeks, like I opened up a swag shop, t-shirts, stickers, prints. If you watch that video, the breaking out of the matrix, escaping the matrix, and you saw some of the art, like all of that's going to be available, or I think some of those will be available on this new site. You can find this through the website. I have links in the description, but I want to show you guys So I want to show you guys what we have here. So this is the swag shop. It's on Threadless is the name of the platform, but you can connect to it through my website, which is always susquehannaalchemy.com. I've got all of these t-shirts with the images, the art images, which you saw the collage work on there. And then I also have some Susquehanna Alchemy lines. These are great. I've got the Johnny Wan Time Traveler, the Susquehanna Mystery Tour edition, the Disco edition, the Investigative Services. The shirts they're nice shirts. They're high quality shirts. I waited until I got one in hand before I started talking about this, and they met my stringent quality standards. But they're good shirts, and they're kind of. I'll show you this one. So this is the commemorative edition, the Johnny Wan Time Traveler commemorative edition right here. I've used this logo a few times lately. This was made for me by my friend James Turek, a really very talented artist, and we could see what's going on there. And I describe it as epic time traveler and king of the gypsies Johnny Wan works behind the scenes to counterbalance the forces of domination and control. This line of t-shirts and swag commemorates Johnny's famous midnight crossing of the Susquehanna, where he risked his life and his faithful cat to warn the unsuspecting townsfolk of the coming storm. And so these shirts are awesome. There are other designs as well, but this is a way if going to Subscribestar isn't a way which you want to support, or if you don't want a session, like these t-shirts, here are the prints you may recognize from that Escaping the Matrix video. And then I also have a lot of those prints and stickers, so check that out. Also, talking about that video, a lot of people were interested in knowing where was that walk. And so that walk was actually it was the first rite of the rites of the 40th parallel, and this is a guidebook of the 40th parallel of 4 places on the 40th parallel in the Susquehanna River, which is easily like a day's trip to and back from anywhere from like New York down to like DC. Like it's close to a very large population center. And then this book tells you where to go, what to look for physically, what the spiritual significance of the areas, and what you can do there. So it provides like a really, really nice model for interacting with the world's grandmother river, the world's oldest current. So you can order that at Susquehanna Alchemy, and it's perfect now that it's getting warm out. It'll give you an opportunity to go to a new place, have a rich experience. The other 3 walks, so the one you saw in the video, that's at Chickies Rock. The other 3 walks, they're all very different. They all have a different feel. They all have like a different quality about that, but they're all within like 20 minutes of each other. So it's a cool thing. I highly recommend that. And what else I got right here? I'll show you what some of those stickers look like up close. This is my calendar, and you could see some of the stickers there. got some stickers there. They came out really nice. So definitely pick up some of that swag, order a service, anything like that. And if that's not an option, like if every dollar's tight, and I can appreciate that. What you could do if you want to do Uncle Mike a little bit of help is share that escaping the matrix video, particularly if you saw it and you think it's worthy of being of sharing. I don't ever ask for that, but I'm asking for that now. That's a video which I put a little bit more effort in. I think that it is thought-provoking to anyone, and the way the YouTube algorithm works is it keeps my stuff just limited into the same sort of groups of people, so it's not getting any sort of new eyeballs. So if you watch the video and if you know anyone who you think could benefit from it, who could find it thought-provoking or interesting or whatever word you want to use, please do that. That's a nice way you can support as well. And I'll continue to make these videos, and I'll continue to tell the stories and share, all the good stuff which I have to share. So we're going to move on to the show. We're going to move on to the topic today. We're going to talk about matrix mind magic, but in theory, I would say that is always what I'm talking about to one degree or another, is understanding it, recognizing it, alternatives for it, and so forth. And so, the simple way of thinking about the matrix modus operandi, its technique for what it does, like it creates a false reality, and the false reality is always grounded on something that's real. It can either mirror something real, or it is an inversion of something that's real, or a perversion of something that's real, but it's still based upon something which has a kernel of truth. And they get everyone to put their attention on it. And just that very act of placing your attention, your awareness, your consciousness on something, and either for a long period of time or not knowing that there's another place to place your consciousness, like, it becomes your reality. A human being becomes our environment, and that includes very much so where we put our awareness, where we put our consciousness, what we're doing. And so this is I talked about alternate reality games a bunch a couple months ago, maybe. This is it's the same model. Alternate reality games create a false reality, and within a false reality, it is self-reflective, like this is what's going on, and then real life begins to exist within the lens of that false reality. I mean, just go out and look at what's happening in the world outside of you, that way people are behaving, the distances that they keep from each other, the protection which they put upon their breathing apparatus. Like, at first, that this was introduced as an idea, this false reality, and now it's been embraced by a lot of people. Like, that's how it works. That's an example of it in a very, very acute expression, but it's the same expression. It's always like there's a false reality. And some of the ones which aren't acute, and that's what we're going to talk about today, the ones that are always there, are the ones which are the deepest. They hold the deepest amount of connection, and they are the hardest to see. And so we're going to talk about that. The other part of the matrix modus operandi, which is creating the false reality and getting people to put their attention and their awareness so they will begin to live their lives in the matrix terminology, in the setup which they created. They also hide, typically in plain sight, truth. And the best way of hiding truth in plain sight is to give you a context so that when you see the truth, you will immediately interpret it based upon their lens. You're like, oh, I don't even see it as the truth. I see it through this lens which I've been given. So let's get into specifics right now, what I'm talking about. We're going to go over a couple of different examples. And let us go to, where am I going to find this? All right. Here we go. Today is April the 9th, and Easter. Easter was just this past weekend. So Easter's a big deal. Easter's a big deal in terms of like the number of people on earth that practice it, and they're thinking the same thing, and they're going through the same experience at the same time. Like, that's a powerful mass ritual, depending upon, regardless of the depths in which someone is committed to it. So we know it's a big deal, and so the whole thing is I don't mean to say this to challenge anyone's belief system or anything like that, but it's at least on a certain level an undeniable false reality, and it creates something much deeper than just like simply like the Easter service. It's more so of having people live their lives within the context of the matrix. So let's talk about like how Easter works and what Easter is for a moment. So like, how is Easter determined? When is Easter, the date of Easter determined? So we know that it is the first Sunday following the full moon that occurs on or just after the spring equinox. So let's break this down. So the spring equinox is a thing. It's real. There's really an equinox. There's really a time on Earth when a day when there is equal amounts of daylight and darkness, and it is not a big jump to reach the conclusion that when the equinox happens, it has a physiological / psychological / spiritual, emotional. It affects us. It probably affects us in such a subtle and deep way that we don't recognize it, but it does. And the reason I say that is every time you see there's like a midline or a transition within the natural world, within baseline reality, within that level of reality, there's an effect. Like when there's twilight, whether that's in the dusk or dawn, certain parts of the natural world come alive in a way that they don't any other time. Like you just listen to the uptick in bird songs, or in crickets, or in when the lightning bugs come out. And so like these things happen during that time, and usually like once it transitions from the darkness to lightness, once it goes through that twilight period, then like things kind of settle down a little bit. You go and you just look at where ocean meets Earth, and we've got that thin stretch of sand we call the beach, but like there's something very special there. There's something that happens to all human beings, why we like to go and lie on the beach and lie on those quartz, silicon, the sand, and we're affected by the vibration of the ocean and the lying in the sun, and all of that stuff. It does something to a human being. When you cross the equator, right? The toilets go the other way. When you are using your body and your hands cross your midline, that is important things happen in brain connections, connectivity. Like that's a big thing also when children are developing, is like when they begin to cross the midline, it represents how different parts of their brain are making connections. So the midline, the midpoint, is a thing in the natural world which has a significance. And so we're immensely sensitive to light. Our eyes, the way we pick up light, and we notice all these little changes. Think about like circadian rhythms, and what happens supposedly when the astronauts are outside of the Schumann resonance. Like there's an effect, so we're affected. We may not be aware of it, but to think that the equinox doesn't have an effect is probably a not well thought out conclusion. But anyway, so the spring equinox is a thing, and it's not just like something that can be measured, but it's probably an event. So then the second thing, which so Easter we know is grounded in that, and that's real, and that's a big thing that it's grounded in. And so the second thing which we know is that it is then grounded to a full moon, and a full moon's a real thing. Like you can look up in the sky, and if you pay attention to the moon over any period of time, you begin to develop an acuity where you can say like, yeah, this is when the moon is full, and this is like the day before it's full, and now it's starting to get a little bit smaller. Like you begin to know that, so it's identifiable, it's real. The moon is full, the equinox is full. This is something specific. This is real. This is real, and then it is grounded. This idea of this ritual is grounded in on a Sunday. There's no such thing as Sunday. Sunday is a made-up concept. It's true within the matrix calendar system. We've got 7-day weeks, and the seventh day is called the Sunday. And so like it's true there, but that's not a universal truth. This is a false reality. We create that, we agreed upon it, and you can be like, well, these are the collective social agreements, and yeah, there's a truth to all of that. I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying it's a false reality. It's a false reality. It's one that I suppose is helpful for us, but nonetheless, it ain't real. So now we've taken these things that are real, and they have been magically linked into a false reality. We see things through, we don't even think about it. We think about the days of the week. That's the first foundational lens in terms of maybe which we think about time, or at least not time in terms of like what time is it, but like the day and the unfolding of events. Like we think in days and months. This is looking at life through a false reality, but it's grounded on truth, but you assume it's real. And so this may sound like, it may sound like, one of two things. So this is what I don't want to come across. So point number one is that this is like sweating a detail. Like, well, what's the big deal? This is, you got to call a day something. The big deal is beginning to recognize how it's all of these small things. Like, you want to move off the matrix, you want to break out of the matrix. You need to recognize like how you're connected to it, like how deep it goes and how subtle it goes, because you want to start deconstructing on that level, because they're going to bring you right along. You could move out of the matrix, but if you're still thinking, because matrix is first and foremost a mental prison, if you're still thinking fundamentally within matrix terms, and this all goes back to like, go and look at your history books and where they tell us all of these, like this stuff originates from. It's the same system that's always been around. That's why it's always around, because people's minds are always like, they don't even realize it's a system. It's just the way, it is. I'll talk about a little bit later, like the ways which you can bridge, like how you can maybe flip the script a little bit and still be not have the matrix as the foundation in which you understand and plan reality, but then still be able to interact with matrix reality for as long as you have to. Like, dates and days are helpful. Like, it's not, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying recognize what it is. What was it? Was there a second point I was going to make? I don't even remember the second point. So let's go back to where I was. So that's the first thing. Is that we went from something real and something rather important, the equinox, or 2 of them a year, and then full moon, and then there are 12 or 13 in a solar cycle, so they're relatively common. And then we put it on something that's false on Sunday, and Sunday comes every 7 days, and then it's tied into this. It's tied into Lent. So Lent is the process, or it's the beginning of the Easter cycle, and it begins 40 days before Easter. So Easter is determined, and then 40 days before that is Lent. And Lent is, I don't know if it's just Catholics that practice it, if there are other denominations of Christianity that practice Lent or a version of Lent, but for these 40 days, like, you give up, maybe an indulgence or something like that, and that harmonizes with the story of Easter, with the story of Jesus. but 40 is also a very, very big deal in the Bible. Regardless of what you think the Bible is, the one thing you can say with 100% accuracy is the Bible plays a very, very big part in shaping modern consciousness. Whether people believe it or not, it's, pretty much everyone knows what it is and has some sort of feeling about it. But anyway, the number 40 is in the Bible is in there 159 times. Across the Old and the New Testament, God flooded the earth for 40 days and nights. Moses fasted for 40 days. Jesus wandered through the wilderness for 40 days. This is like kind of like where this 40-day Lent, at least the outer story of why the 40-day Lent cycle is tied to Easter. Regardless of all of that, it's like now you're into this like other system, like it's tied in. We began with this false reality of Sunday, and then now it's added into this like 40 countdown, and now like 40 has a significance like, whatever that significance. In the Bible, the significance is always about challenge, it seems, but whatever 40 may be, it is undeniably connected into this process, and no one thinks this way. It's like, of course you don't think this way, but this is what it is, and this is how, like, you begin to understand reality through this artificial lens. You're like, well, this is what happens. And I would say, like, the idea of like giving up something which is just something you don't need, like, there's something of great truth in that. Like, there's a real valuable lesson. It forms discipline, makes you appreciate things more, it gets you out of your normal cycles. But typically, this particular storyline of Easter is often tied up to like guilt and shame, and like, wow, this is bad for me, or like, so now there's the idea of doing something which could be empowering, like to be able to develop a willpower to do something which is just feeding a more base desire, like, just like a something driven by instinct, as opposed to, like, let's say something driven by conscious choice. That's very empowering to be able to give something up. But it's also now in this story, it's tied with emotional qualities, and typically non-serving ones, guilt and shame and all of those sort of things. Oh, this is bad for me, I shouldn't do it. Oh, I couldn't keep it, I had to cheat, on my Lent, whatever. So we're beginning to see emotion is a big part of selling, of committing to a false reality. Repetition and emotion, if they both can be combined, that's a very, very powerful sort of combination. And there's a truth to that. That is, like, that's what you want to align to. You're going to align to something. Like, even the aligning to nothing is an aligning to something. It's like, that's what you're aligning to. Well, I choose to align to nothing. Oh, you're aligning to nothing then. Like, that is just what consciousness is. And so when we begin to understand that we're going to align to something, and we're going to be connected to it in a certain way, we can begin to have more of a command over experience. So let's go a little bit deeper now. So let's just even talk about the equinox. So, like, look right here. So all you need to know about the March equinox, 2021. This marks the beginning of the spring season in the northern hemisphere. No matter where you are on Earth, the equinox brings us a number of seasonal effects. And here they go, and they define it in this article. And this is like astronomy essentials. So at the equinox, the Earth's hemispheres are receiving the sun's rays equally. Night and day, often said to be in equal length. In fact, the word equinox comes from the Latin of equal and night. For our ancestors, whose timekeeping was less precise than ours, night and day likely did seem equal, but we today know it's not exactly so. So This is another type of mind magic. This is more so about like hiding the truth, and it's filled with like lies and or inaccuracies. And I don't know if the bot that wrote this story, well, I guess I don't know, it's just not true. It's just not true. They're telling you like contradictory stuff right here. So they're telling you, let's break this down. So equinox, we know, means equal darkness, equal light on earth. And they're telling you right here, they're like, the ancestors, their counting was less precise than ours. And it depends upon how you're going to define like what the timekeeping is. Like, I suppose they didn't have atomic clocks per se, but they had a count of the days, which is seemingly more accurate than us who need to rely on leap year. But nonetheless, this right here, the Earth's two hemispheres are receiving the sun's rays equally. This is mind magic. This is mind magic right now, because that is an abstract. Like, if they tell you that, you're going to picture in your mind the Earth, looking at the Earth, and you're going to picture it receiving light equally on the hemispheres. Like, whether you're consciously aware that you did that or not, like, that's what happens. And you are going back to an image which has been presented to you in the past, like maybe in a science class or something. Like, however it is you picture in your mind, or maybe, whatever it is, maybe you follow a different sort of understanding of what Earth is. But nonetheless, you're picturing it in your mind. And whatever it is you're picturing in your mind, that's an abstract. It may be accurate, it may be inaccurate, but it's an abstract nonetheless. So this is part of the mind magic, is they're trying to get you to think about something that is objectively real through abstract lens. As I said, some abstracts are better than the others. There's a place for abstracts, but when you're talking about objective reality, then this is how you get people away from it. You give them an abstract. So the opposite is true as well. You go back to it by seeing what is objectively real. So what is objectively real about the equinox? The equinox is when it's literally the same amount of light and the same amount of darkness. Like, that's the equinox. They told you that's the definition. They also told you the definition is March 21st. So now they're going to go and they're going to tell you this. And so part of the matrix mind magic is like couching terms in the way which they want you to understand it. So what is an equilux? Here's a new word for you, equilux. The word is used to describe the day on which the day and the night are equal. Well, that's the equinox. That's what the equinox means, is the day when it's light. But they're like, no, that's actually the equilux. That's the equilux. So the equilux happens a few or several days after the autumn equinox, or several days before the spring equinox. So the actual day, the objective reality day of when there is like half daylight and half darkness, that's not even on the day they're telling you. Like, even people who are going to go and recognize that okay, the equinox, something special happens. I'm not really certain what to do, but I know I want to do something. I want to pay homage to it. I want to at least bring my conscious awareness to it. If you're following their calendar, they're giving you the wrong friggin' date. They're giving you the wrong date. I'll show you this past year. So look right here. This is March 21st, 2021. This is Philadelphia. This is the closest city. This is from the NOAA website. It's considered the gold standard for sunrise and sunset times. The day of equal night and light and darkness should have like the same sunrise and sunset, and we see they're not. They're off by 12 inches, or 6 inches in each direction, or 6 minutes, excuse me. And then we go and we look. Well, on March 16th, we see that this is the closest it got on their calendar, on their system. So like the actual equinox would not fall between when we consider a day, beginning at what we call 12 a.m. But on the 16th, the sun rose at 6:10 a.m. and set at 6:09 a.m. So this is what they're calling the equilux, which is really the equinox. And what's happening is we're seeing all sorts of maneuvering happening. And again, this seems to be minutia, but it is the minutia which is what hides the objective reality from in front of you. This is how you hide it in plain sight. And if you don't begin to separate the wheat from the chaff, and you're still grounded on that system, well, then what you're grounded on is a false reality. So let's see what it says. Oh, this is great. So it says the upcoming equinox, the northern hemisphere spring equinox, and the southern hemisphere's autumnal equinox falls on the 20th. Everyone worldwide supposedly receives 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. Generally speaking, that's true. But precisely speaking, well, if the equinox is a real thing, so think about like twilight in reality. Like it's only twilight when it's twilight. Like, the birds are not singing like before or after twilight. The magic doesn't happen unless, you're at the precise time. But precisely speaking, there is more daylight than nighttime on the day of the equinox, but precisely speaking, there is more daylight than nighttime on the day of the equinox, an additional 8 minutes or so of daylight at mid-temperate latitudes. There are two reasons why. So now they're going to go and they're going to give you the matrix mind magic, and they're going to explain like, well, this is right. Well, first is because the sun is a disk, you see, it's not a point. You're thinking it was a point, but it's actually a disk. But when you think about it in a disk term, well, then you'll know that this is going to go and create this. This is abstract mind magic. Like maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. It doesn't matter. The truth is the equinox is when it's 12 and 12. And you're just giving me stories explaining why this is it. And then here's the other thing. Well, it's actually atmospheric refraction, like another abstract. How do you know what atmospheric refraction is? So like all of these things which we are not experiencing with our actual senses, is being used to then create a context in terms of which you understand reality. All right. So, that's what, this is the game. This is just an example, but it's also an easy example to begin to rectify, because what we want to do is you have to be connected to something, begin to become aware of what you're connecting to. And probably the safest thing to do, if you're recognizing like anything which is a story is going to be, anything that's an abstract is matrix. Now there's the matrix and matrix, but I'm going to suggest to everyone, probably the best thing to do is ground it in something which is objectively real. And then surrender to the fact that like there's a mystery behind it and we don't really understand it. So I want to talk about the moon directly right now. So the moon is something which I personally is a cycle which makes a lot of grounding sense to me. And I'll talk about in another video like the difference between the moon and the months and how to flip that script. But first thing is like, the moon is suspect. I'll be the first one to admit it. Like, I know all the Saturn moon connection, and there is some truth about it. The moon is on the same cycle as the Saturn cycle, 29 days versus 29 years. The moon is weird. Like it's different than all of the other moons, or at least that's what they're telling us. Like, like this is another example of like objective reality versus like abstract reality. So it's like we all know that the moon is closer to us than the sun. I don't know that. That was just what I was taught. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying like, I can't say for certain. But when I look at the moon and I see the sun, like I can't help but unconsciously think of the moon as being very close and the sun is far away. But the objective truth is, like if no one ever told me that, I would make the conclusion that the sun and the moon are probably the same size and equidistance from where I was standing on Earth, because they look the exact same size in the heavens. But we're told this. We're like, well, actually the moon is much, much closer. It's 400 times closer. And the sun is 400 times further, but the moon happens to be 400 times smaller than the sun. And because of those two different things, they actually they balance or cancel each other out, and they appear to be the exact same size. Like, that's all a bunch of abstract. Like, the only thing that's true is the fact that the moon and the sun appear to be the same size. The only thing that we could say that's true with our senses, again, I'm not saying that abstracts don't have a place. I'm not saying that they can't point to truth. I'm just saying they definitely point to you're opening yourself up. Particularly if you're trying to ground in reality, your objective reality, you are opening yourself up to at least blind spots. So let me give you, let's talk about the moon. So, the moon's got like a bunch of weird stuff. The moon, there are a bunch of there are a bunch of stories from peoples around the earth, and they all hold something in common. They tell the story of the time before the moon. Again, I've never met these peoples. I've just read stuff on the internet that tells me that this exists. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying, like, I'm at least calling out where the information comes from. And all that stuff, like, it does lead to pause. But then at the same time, like, I know from my own experience, like, one, I don't have anything better. It's the most real thing that I can see. And until I have something better that makes more sense, this makes the most amount of sense to me. That is a conscious choice of mine in terms of how I look at the moon. Each person needs to come up with their own. The one thing I suggest is when we make our decisions on what we're going to align with, we know why we're making our decisions. And so that is, I think, the best in which we can do. So that said, let's go look at this thing about the moon. So a lot of people recognize, I'm not the only one who's like, the moon is cool. There are a lot of people who like to follow the moon cycle. I always follow the moon cycle. If the moon is out in the sky, I'm looking at it. I always see it. And so right here, these are like moon calendars. And, if someone's got a moon calendar, I guarantee, like, the moon is something which is meaningful in their life. They put the time and energy to become aware of the lunar cycles, for whatever reason that may be. But as you can see in each one of these calendars, each one of these posters which someone could buy, the moon is grounded in the calendar system. This is January down to December, and here's like 1 to 31, and then this is the moon cycle, and this is the moon cycle falling into the cycle of the calendar. So the foundation in terms of understanding this is like the moon fits into the calendar system, not the other way around. That would be, you see the moon cycle, like the true moon cycle would be from new moon to new moon. That's a real month. The month beginning on the first of the month, that's a false reality based upon something that's true. All of these maps right here are, though they are focused on the moon, they are subtly reconfirming that the foundational understanding of reality is through this artificial means of time manipulation, and that is what that there, like, what is the foundation in terms of understanding reality. That's what holds the most amount of truth. Or the most amount of, like truth to the person, like, your foundation, the lens which you see something, that's how you're going to understand all reality. And so as long as you fall, regardless of what you think, as long as you fall within the calendar system, regardless if you fall under like all of these other like general understandings of reality, you're still in matrix consciousness. There's no other way around it. And so it's the deconstructing, the conscious deconstructing, and the understanding of the deconstructing of these connections is how we begin to slowly and more deeply deconstruct the matrix mind magic. Let me say this one last thing. I'm going to give you one more example, and then that'll be it for the first part of this video. So here's the thing what you need to think of. There's so much effort to keep everyone off balance and disconnected from the objective reality that, you're like, wow, this is so much. Well, we're going to look at that from a slightly different angle. And the question is like, why would there be so much effort to keep the simple true nature of what life on earth should be aligned to? Why is there so much effort to keep that hidden? And it's because it is such our natural way of being to be connected with the true cycles in which we are living life, under the heavens, standing on earth, that as soon as we begin to become aligned with it, like that just overtakes. There is a artisanal wellspring of which would naturally align a human being to a much greater cycle of life. And so that's why it has to be worked so hard, is because like if they're not always on their guard, like we will just naturally start becoming human beings again in alignment with the earth. Everything which is part of everything which falls into matrix mind magic is to disempower you. Like all of these like stories and understandings of reality are to keep you disempowered. So that is another good way of understanding if you are looking at something through a matrix lens. If it feels disempowering the way you're looking at it, it is a matrix lens, because the human experience is meant to be immensely empowering and never empowering to another person's disempowerment. That is the matrix. So let me give you one more example of matrix mind magic. I stumbled across this on the internet as I was pulling the slides together for this show, which I was recording on the moon, and this just kind of like cracked me up. So it's a great example of like, this is mind magic. This is how you hide something in plain sight. This is how you hide the truth in plain sight, by setting up a context. So I'd never heard of this before. There's this thing called Apophenia. Maybe I'm pronouncing it right. Maybe I'm not. Who knows? Audio pareidolia and musical ear syndrome. And so I'll just read a little bit of this. Don't let the weird Greek words in the title scare you off from reading this fascinating article on one category of musical ear syndrome. Like imagine that. So like imagine you've got like this thing where you're always hearing the like music in the background, this angelic music, and then they're like, oh, it's actually a syndrome. Oh no, you do not want to be hearing angelical music all the time. That is a syndrome, and don't worry, we're going to take care of it. So musical ear syndrome is a relatively common phenomenon. So this happens with a lot of people. This is part of the human experience, where you hear non-tinnitus phantom sounds that are not of psychiatric nature. So it's like you hear stuff which other people hear, but I'm not going to call you crazy. You're not crazy, but you're hearing stuff. A lot of people are saying they're hearing things, but no one else can hear the things which you're hearing. Typically, you would hear sounds like music or singing or voices. If you hear music or singing, it may be vague or clear if you hear voices. So what they're saying is like there are people out there. It's a common human experience to hear singing no matter where you go. Here's an example. I cut this from later in this article. Sandy explained, I have musical ear syndrome. I've had musical ear syndrome since childhood. Since childhood, I've been hearing the angels sing. I can't remember not hearing the etheric music from time to time, the ethereal music, most often in connection with forced hot air systems. So what they're doing is they're taking this natural phenomenon of being human, which some people are able to hear things of music, of sound, of ethereal music, and then they're framing it up as a syndrome, right? Now here's where things get really interesting. There are two categories of musical ear syndrome. In the first, there is no apparent external stimulus for the phantom sounds. So he's recognizing, yeah, you're really hearing something. You really are hearing something which no one else can hear. And then they're saying the second one is the phantom music is triggered by an external background sound. Either way, they are slicing and dicing and categorizing and giving these names to take an objective, real experience of being able to hear something, like, without being told that, oh, you're losing your hearing or anything like that. Like if you were just to hear music all the time and no one told you you're not supposed to hear music, you would my assumption is, assuming it's not like glaring and like, bursting your eardrums, like this is probably like a very special way of experiencing life. The synthenasia. Synthenasia is when people experience senses which normally don't go together. Like you can taste or smell sounds or tones. You see musical notes. You hear colors. Like there's a way which we experience reality where one, we're not supposed to experience that way. And, when it does occur, still shows itself, it's labeled, it's told something. Synthenasia, this musical ear syndrome is another example. And what this is this is hiding in plain sight an objective truth of being like part of a human being. It is rewriting a script. It's providing a narrative. It's providing a narrative from from a trusted source. This is part of it. Like this is a trusted source. Why is it a trusted source? Because we told you it's a trusted source. A doctor is important because ever since there's been TV, we've made like doctors always really important in TV and shown a lot of TV shows about doctors and all that sort of good stuff. And so this is your trusted source. So a doctor says this. I read the comments from this guy. Like the guy sounds like a sweet guy. And there's an older man who wrote that article, but he just sees the world from a certain perspective, and it's been true to him. And he's passing on his expertise to everyone by robbing them of coming up with their own conclusion as to what their actual experience could or is. This is matrix mind magic. Create a false reality, disconnect you from the real reality, give you context. It's all these like subtle background sort of things. So I want to, this is what that video about, the escaping the matrix and talking about current, talking about like understanding the heavens. This is what the new services, which I'm offering about, is looking at astrology, not from like the matrix lens of like, this is what Sagittarius means and this is what this means, but like breaking it down, recognizing what's story and what's not story. Like this awareness of both like how we are connected to the matrix in deep consciousness, and then how we are also moving out of that connection is how we move through this. And my sense is, though there are these hundreds and hundreds of things which are existing in our unconscious that we're not even thinking about, which are giving us lenses to interpret reality, like as soon as it starts bursting, like, the whole thing is going to pop open. And that's when things are going to get really, really interesting for us human beings who've remained human beings. So this is just about done the first part. I'm going to go on the second part, and I'm going to talk about stories. 3 stories are, I've gotten 3 gifts in the past week, like from people. And so 2 of them really cool, and I'm going to share that with you. And then the third one is the story from our Masonic guy, and this thing is mind-blowing. I hope you come along for the second half. If not, I'll talk to you soon. This is Uncle Mike saying goodbye.